On a freezing night in January 1943, a radio station in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness transmitted a message that was never meant to exist. It wasn't in English, it wasn't in code, and it wasn't meant for anyone alive. The message lasted exactly 47 seconds, then the station went silent forever. Decades later, when the US government finally declassified fragments of the incident, one question remained unanswered. Who sent the signal, and why did it predict events that hadn't happened yet? The story begins far from Washington, far from the noise of war rooms and political debates, in a place where the wind howled like a living thing and the night stretched endlessly into darkness. Station 47 wasn't supposed to be important. It was one of dozens of remote signal monitoring outposts built during World War II, designed to intercept Japanese communications across the Pacific. Located deep in Alaska's Aleutian chain, it was isolated, difficult to access, and largely forgotten even by the military command that created it. The men stationed there were not heroes in the traditional sense. They didn't storm beaches or fly bombing missions. They listened. Day after day, night after night, they sat in cramped wooden rooms filled with humming equipment, headphones pressed tight against their ears, scanning frequencies for fragments of enemy communication. Most days, they heard nothing. Static. Endless, suffocating static. But on January 17, 1943, everything changed. Private Thomas Avery had the night shift. He was 22 years old from Ohio and had never seen a winter like Alaska's. The cold here wasn't just uncomfortable, it was oppressive. It seeped into your bones, slowed your thoughts, made time feel heavy. He sat alone in the signal room, a dim yellow bulb flickering above him. Outside, the wind slammed against the walls like a fist. Inside, the only sound was the soft crackle of the radio. Avery adjusted the dial, scanning through frequencies. Nothing. 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 Then suddenly, a voice. He froze. It wasn't unusual to pick up stray signals, but this was different. The voice was clear, too clear, and it wasn't speaking Japanese. It wasn't speaking any language Avery recognized. He leaned forward, heart pounding. "Station 47 to command," he said into the mic. "I've got something." No response. The storm outside had likely disrupted communications. He turned back to the radio. The voice continued. Calm, measured, almost mechanical. Avery grabbed a notebook and began writing what he heard, copying the sounds as best as he could. The transmission lasted exactly 47 seconds. Then it stopped, just like that. Silence returned. The next morning, Avery brought his notes to Lieutenant Charles Bennett, the commanding officer of Station 47. Bennett was not a man easily impressed. He had served in the military for over a decade, seeing his share of strange reports and overactive imaginations. When Avery handed him the notebook, Bennett skimmed it with mild interest. "What language is this supposed to be?" he asked. "I don't know, sir," Avery replied. But it wasn't static, it was deliberate. Bennett frowned. The symbols Avery had written weren't quite letters, but they weren't random either. There was structure to them, repetition, patterns. "Did you record it?" Bennett asked. "No, sir. It came through too fast." Bennett sighed. "Probably interference, atmospheric anomaly. Happens all the time." But Avery shook his head again. "No, sir. This was different." There was something in his voice, something that made Bennett pause. Reluctantly, he ordered the signal logs reviewed. That's when things got strange. At exactly 02:17 a.m., the time Avery claimed to have heard the transmission, the station's equipment had registered a spike in signal activity, but not from any known frequency. The source couldn't be traced. It was as if the signal had come from nowhere, or everywhere at once. Bennett reported the incident to Regional Command.
Within days, a response came back. Continue monitoring. Record any further anomalies. Do not discuss outside of authorized personnel. Simple enough, except the signal came back. January 19th, same time, 02:17 a.m. Avery was on duty again. This time, he was ready. The moment the voice appeared, he activated the recording device. Again, the same strange language, same tone, same length, 47 seconds. When it ended, he immediately replayed the recording. The room filled with the eerie, emotionless voice, and something else. A faint background sound, almost like wind, but not the wind outside. This was different. Rhythmic, controlled, artificial. The recording was sent to Washington. That's when the real investigation began. Within weeks, Station 47 was no longer forgotten. A team of cryptographers, linguists, and intelligence officers arrived, bringing with them advanced equipment and strict orders. The transmissions were analyzed, studied, compared against every known language on Earth. No match. But patterns began to emerge, not in the language itself, but in its structure. The sequences repeated, not randomly, but in a way that suggested meaning, mathematical meaning. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a civilian cryptographer brought in for the analysis, made the breakthrough. "It's not a language," she said during a briefing. "Then what is it?" Bennett asked. "It's a system," Hayes replied. "A predictive system." The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" Bennett pressed. Hayes laid out a series of decoded sequences. "These aren't words, they're data points, dates, coordinates, events." Bennett frowned. "Events?" Hayes nodded. "Yes, we've cross-referenced some of the patterns with known military activity." She paused. "And they match." The first confirmed match was small, a naval skirmish in the Pacific, minor, barely reported, but the signal from Station 47 had described it, 2 days before it happened. Then came a larger one, an air raid, again predicted in the transmission, again before it occurred. Panic spread through the command structure. If the signals were real, if they were predicting future events, then where were they coming from? Theories emerged. Some believed it was an advanced enemy code. Others suggested experimental U.S. technology. But one theory, unspoken at first, began to take hold among the scientists. What if the signal wasn't coming from somewhere else, but from some other time? Hayes was the first to say it out loud. What if we're not intercepting a transmission from the present, but from the future? The idea sounded insane, but the data didn't lie. The transmissions continued, always at 02:17 a.m., always 47 seconds long, always containing fragments of the future. But then something changed. February 3rd, 1943. The signal came earlier than expected, 02:12 a.m., 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Avery noticed immediately.
"Lieutenant," he called out, "it's starting early." The room filled with tension. This had never happened before. Hayes rushed in, recording equipment in hand. The voice began, but this time it wasn't the same. The tone was different, urgent, almost emotional. The sequences were faster, more chaotic, as if the system itself was breaking down. Avery struggled to keep up, writing furiously. The recording device captured everything, and then, at the very end, the voice changed. For the first time, it spoke in English. Just one sentence, 7 words. Words that would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. "Do not trust the origin of this signal." Silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Hayes slowly turned to Bennett. "What does that mean?" she whispered. But Bennett had no answer. The message was sent to Washington immediately. Within 48 hours, new orders arrived. Strict, final. Station 47 was to be shut down. All equipment dismantled. all records sealed, all personnel reassigned. No explanation, no discussion. Avery didn't understand. None of them did. If the signal could predict the future, if it could save lives, why shut it down? On their final night at the station, Avery returned to the signal room one last time. He didn't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. The equipment was already being packed up, most of it offline, but one receiver remained connected, barely functional. Avery sat down, put on the headphones, turned the dial. Static. Then, a voice. His heart stopped. It was faint, broken, but it was there. He leaned closer, straining to hear, and then he realized something that made his blood run cold. The voice was his own, distorted, older, but unmistakably his. "If anyone hears this," the voice said, crackling through the static, "do not continue the transmissions. We were wrong. It's not predicting the future." A burst of interference. Then, "It's creating it." The signal cut out. Avery ripped off the headphones, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. The next morning, Station 47 was gone. The official records described it as a routine closure, nothing unusual, nothing significant. But buried deep within classified archives, the recordings remained, the notes, the patterns, the warnings, and one final entry, added years later by someone unknown. Further analysis suggests temporal feedback loop. Origin remains unidentified. Possibility: signal is self-generated across time. Recommendation: never attempt reactivation. Decades passed. The world moved on. War ended. Technology advanced. History forgot Station 47 until 1997. A small team of researchers digging through declassified documents stumbled upon the files. Most dismissed them as Cold War paranoia, fiction disguised as fact. But one researcher, Dr. Michael Lang, became obsessed. He recreated the equipment, the frequencies, the conditions, and on January 17, 1998, at exactly 2:17 a.m., he turned it on. The room filled with static. Then, a voice. Calm, measured, familiar. And somewhere, across time, in a frozen station long abandoned, the loop began again.